Alright, today we're starting chapter 2, where we're going to be solving linear equations and inequalities, and we're also going to be looking at graphs of related functions. So I asked you to solve this by using the distributive property. So we should have got negative 40 minus 12x, and then we do have to distribute this negative as well. So it's a negative x minus 8. Okay, there are many different ways you can go from here. I recommend getting all of your like terms together on one side. So I have the negative 12x and negative x, which is negative 13x, and then negative 40 and negative 8 will be negative 48. So then we're going to add 48 to both sides. I'm just going through this quickly since you guys have already done this. And then you get 39 is equal to negative 13x. So your last step is to divide by negative 13. So a positive divided by a negative, we know is going to result in a negative. How many times does 13 go into 39? 3. Okay, so x is going to equal negative 3. Okay, so make any corrections that you need to. And then we are going to look at B, where we're going to be combining fractions. So again, we're doing this without our calculator. So we want to get all of the numbers on one side, all of the variable terms on the other. So since we have our variable n here, I'm going to move over the 3/4. If you're combining fractions, you're going to need a common denominator. So to get a common denominator, we can multiply the top and the bottom by the same number, because that's equivalent to 1, which would give us negative 6 over 8. Okay, so you have 5/8 minus 6 over 8. So 5 minus 6 is negative 1. The denominator stays the same. Okay, so that's all review from your previous math classes. Okay, and then you're going to drop this down. You can divide by negative 1/2, but when you're working with fractions, instead of dividing by a fraction, it's a lot easier to think of it as multiplying by the reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of negative 1/2? Negative 2. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 2. I always put this side in parentheses just so it doesn't look like minus 2. So negative 2 times negative 1/2 is a positive 1. That's why we're able to do that and just get n. A negative times a negative, if you need to, you can put this over 1, okay? And then a negative divided by a negative is a positive. What goes into both 2 and 8? 2, so divide by 2 and you'll get 1/4. Okay, it is positive because you're dividing a negative by a negative. And then you can always plug in your answers and double check. Okay, so you can plug in negative 3 and make sure that was equal to negative 9 when you follow your order of operations. Same thing here. You can plug in 1/4, make sure that you would end up with 5/8 once you follow your order of operations. All right, now the next problem I feel like is like one of those riddles you read on the internet. There are 6 people in Jacob's family. Jacob's sister is 5 years younger than he is. He has twin brothers who are 3 years older than he is. His mom is 3 times Jacob's age, and his dad is 4 years older than his mom. The total of all of the ages in the family is 165 years. Okay, what we have to do here is we have to find how old Jacob is. And then it says we need to define a variable, write an equation, and solve the problem. Okay, so we need to make sure we're doing that. Defining the variable, writing an equation, solving the problem. Okay, you can call the variable whatever you want. Since we're trying to find how old Jacob is, whatever variable you choose has to represent Jacob's age. So I chose A, you can choose whatever you want, you just got to label it. That's the first thing we're going to do. So I said A for age. Some people said J for Jacob. Some people said X because they like that. Okay, so you can decide. Okay, and then with your row, I want you guys to try to come up with an equation. You don't have to simplify it. In fact, I prefer that you don't until we double check to make sure you set that up. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time right now to think about that, think about how you want to set that up. I'm going to come around and check in with you guys. Before we start solving, we're just going to double check and make sure you guys have a nice looking equation. Okay, at the very least, we know that all of the ages together, it says is 165. Okay, so even if you're having trouble getting started, right, we can use some of these key values that they give us. So it says Jacob's sister is 5 years younger than he is. Okay, so Kanan, what'd you get for that? For Jacob's sister, how did you represent the 5 years younger? Okay, good. And then I used A, so I'm just going to use A minus 5. Okay, so that's what I did first as well. So 5 years younger. He has twin brothers who are 3 years older than he is. So there's two different ways you could write this. So we're going to do plus. We know that each brother is A plus 3. You could write that out twice, which I saw some of you did, or you can write it as 2 times A plus 3. Okay, so you can either do A plus 3 times plus A plus 3, or you can do 2 times A plus 3. Okay, we don't want to square it because then we would be multiplying A plus 3 times A plus 3, and we have to FOIL. Okay, so we'll simplify that in a moment. And then we have his mom, who is 3 years times his age, so we are going to multiply there. Okay, and then Bella, can you tell me what you got for the dad who's 4 years older than the mom? Yes. Okay, so this would be the mom's age plus 4. Okay, so we have his sis. We have the twin bros. We have mom. We have dad. And the first thing it says is there are how many people in his family? There are 6 people in his family. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who is the 6th person that I have to include? Don't forget about Jacob. We team Jacob in here? Did that come out when you guys were kids? The team Jacob, team Edward? Or is that like way past your ages? Twilight. They're like team Jacob.
Team Hannah Montana.
Okay, so if you need to make an adjustment to your equation, that's okay. Let's make that adjustment now, and then we're going to simplify. Okay, so we're going to come up with a nice simplified equation. So we have 2a plus 6 here. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is combine all the a's and then all the numbers, and then we're going to solve. We're going to do that without a calculator. Right, so you have A, 1A here. This would be 2A, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10A, and then you have a negative 5 and a positive 6, which is 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. We're going to see how simple this is without our calculator, because we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So 10A would be 160, and it's going to be 16, just like some of you, right? Okay, so solve the problem. Jacob is 16 years old. I guess just like in Twilight, he's probably 16. We'll show you a picture after. And then you'll be like, oh yeah, still have it. Alright, and then for example 3, we're solving for a variable. A question like this is almost always on an SAT or a PSAT. You may remember doing something like this in geometry, and this is a geometry formula. So the formula for the area of a trapezoid is given by A equals 1/2 H B1 plus B2. Remember that B1 and B2 stand for the two bases of a trapezoid. H is the height, they tell you A is the area. And then you have to solve the formula for B sub 1. Okay, so we have to get that by itself. So you need to make sure that you are showing your steps here for how you are getting that variable by itself. Okay, so we're going to start here. And there are different ways that you can start this and still be correct. And sometimes, like, I'll point to the variable that I'm solving so I know, okay, this is going to stay. I have to move everything else over. So when you are solving, we know we have to move over what's on the outside of the parentheses first, the 1/2 and the h. Again, it doesn't matter what order you do that in, but if there's a fraction, I would move that over first. So you can divide by 1/2, or like we said earlier, it's a lot easier to multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply each side by 2. Okay, so when you multiply by 2, you're going to get 2a is equal to 2 times 1/2 makes 1. So you just have h times b1 plus b2. So then we are going to divide both sides by h. And then you don't need your parentheses anymore when they're on the side with nothing in front or behind them. Okay, so then our last step is just going to be to subtract. And you're going to write this out as 2a divided by h minus b sub 2 equals b sub 1. Okay, so that is going to be your formula. Okay, so you'll have different formulas that you'll have to solve for different variables there. All right, the next thing we're going to do today is solve linear equations by graphing. And we're going to start off with some important vocab. So when you are solving an equation, that solution is called a root. Okay, so when you are looking at different directions, they might say find the solution of an equation, or they could say find the root. Those are the same things. Okay, and then to solve those, you are going to find what is called a related function. I'm going to show you how to do that on the next page. Okay, what you do is you solve the equation for 0, and then you end up replacing 0 with f of x. Okay, so when you're doing this one, you would subtract 9 from both sides. I know this looks kind of weird because it's you can't see the 0. But if you were to minus 9 from both sides, you'd end up with 2x plus 4 equals 0, and then you just replace that with an f of x. Okay, speaking of 0, that is another name for your solution. So the values of x for which f of x is equal to 0 are called zeros of the function. So we're going to add that as another way we can be asked to solve. So if they say the solution, the root, the zeros, those are all the same. Okay, and then a 0 is also an x-intercept. So there's one more name. So the 0 of a function is the x-intercept. Yep, so you can be asked several different ways to find the solution. Whether they're asking for a solution, a root, a 0, or an x-intercept, you can use that to solve, to find your equation. All right, so once you have that down, we'll flip it over to the back. Oh, you can also look at, so this graph is helpful. It just shows you what your 0 is for your equation here. So this is your x-intercept, again, which is a 0, which is a root, which is a solution. Okay, once you get to the back, go ahead and read those directions, because there are going to be two things that we are finding here. So the first thing we have to find is the related function. Okay, then you are going to graph that function, and it says to use the graph to solve the equation. So that's what we're going to do. Whenever you are finding the related function, that means you are going to write this in the form f of x equals mx plus b. So instead of y equals mx plus b, we're going to use f of x. Okay, we are going to graph the related function and then use that to solve. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do for the related function is we are going to move everything to the left side to get 0 on the right side. So we're going to get 0 on the right of the equation. Okay, so every time you do this, we want a 0 on the right side. So in order to do that, we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. I like to line mine up under the like terms. Okay, and then once you have x minus 4 equal to 0, the related function is just f of x equals x minus 4. Okay, and that is called the related function. Okay, so go ahead and graph that using the strategies we reviewed this week and last week. I guess mainly last week. Okay, so we're going to start at the y-intercept, which is negative 4. Our slope is 1, so up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Make sure you keep going until you hit that axis, okay? And then we're going to connect those points. Okay, and then your solution is always going to be your x-intercept. Okay, so find your x-intercept. In this case, it's 4. So what we're going to write is x equals 4. Okay, so we found the related function, we graphed it, and we used the graph to find our solution. Okay, now, if you wanted to check this with algebra, it's really simple, right? If you have x minus 4 equals 0, you would just add 4 over. Those should be the same. Okay, so absolutely check it with algebra. Just know they want you to use the graph, so I want you to make sure those two line up. Okay, so I want you guys to start part B. So I want you to get 0 on the right side. Okay, so let's double check that we added 1 over. So when you add over the 1, you have negative 1/3 x plus 2 equals 0. So you have your related function. Make sure that you do write the related function here. Okay, and I'm even fine if you don't put like the equals 0, if you just want to put the f of x equals, that's okay. Okay, so we're going to start at 2, and then I'm just going to go over again how to use your slope, because I started creating some of the tests, and I know that some of us aren't going the right direction. So if it's a negative, you can go down 1, and then right 1, 2, 3, and then down 1, 1, 2, 3, down 1, 1, 2, 3, and then if you go up 1, then you're going to go to the left. So if you go up 1, then you're going to the left. And if you have a negative slope, one thing I told you to double check, and I still want you to do that checking, is if you have a negative, then from the left to the right, this should be going down. Okay, from the left to the right, it should be going down here. Okay, and then your solution is always going to be where your x-intercept is. Okay, so the x-intercept is at 6, so you're just going to put x is equal to 6. So you need to have these two things. You need the related function, okay, and you need to have what your x value is going to equal. Okay, and then this one was a positive slope, so we see it is going up from left to right. All right, how did part B go? Good, great, terrible? All right, so for 6, we're solving inequalities. We're going to graph the solution on a number line. Okay, so I don't think that we've graphed on a number line on here, so I'm going to walk you through how we want that to look. And then we are going to solve each inequality, and we're going to do that without our calculator. Decimals. Okay, so the first thing I would do is, if on one side of the equation you have like terms, combine those together. So you have 1.4c minus 2.9c. I would just get those together first. Okay, you can do that in your head if you're good at mental math. Some of us might be more visual and you want to write it out. Because that's the bigger number is negative, I know my answer is going to be negative, but I can just line up 2.9 and 1.4 and subtract. 9 minus 4 is 5, 2 minus 1 is 1, so negative 1.5c is greater than 3.5c plus 7.5. Okay, you guys with me so far? Sorry, was that freaking out? Okay, so once you subtract, okay, it's going to take the sign of the larger number, so it's going to stay negative, and then we're going to get all of our c terms together, so all of the variables on one side. Now this one should be easier to do in our heads, but in case it's not very simple for you, you can think of money, right? It's $1.50 and $3.50. So how much dollars do you have? How many dollars? $5. Okay. You can also just add up, right? You add 0.5 to 1.52, 2 and 3 is 5. Because they're both negative, you have negative 5c. Okay, and then this is where the fun is. So two things. One, to get c by itself, I'm going to divide each side by negative 5. And remember, when you divide by a negative, what are you going to have to do? Yep. So we're going to flip. I'm going to write just a little note here. flip sign. If you multiply, or not of, by a negative. And I like having that reminder on there because if I forget something, it's generally something small like that. And so reading that reminder helps me. Okay, so then I'm going to have C is less than, and I know this is going to be some negative value. So there's a few different ways that you can think of this division. When you're doing 7.5 divided by 5, if you want to set this up old school style, well, really, you can just do this and you can move your decimal up, right? So 5 goes into 7 one time. Bring down the 5. 5 goes into 25 5 times. Okay, so this is what you'll have here. Okay, you could also just move the decimal over. So if you move it over, you can just do 75 divided by 5, which is 15, and then you just move it back. Right, so if you know 75 divided by 5 is 15, move the decimal back one place. Either way, that's fine. I know, it's probably been a while. That's why we're going through your reminders. So, the extra 2. Okay, so for this, it says graph the solution set. We're going to write that there. What are you talking about the extra 2 though? Oh, it's just the 25. Is that what you mean or something else? So 5 goes into 7.5, 1.5 times. I would just do, you can just do 75 divided by 5, right? That's 15. If you move the decimal 1 to the right, you just have to move it back 1 to the left. Or you can just bring that up. No, they taught you that at Merckville, Raleigh, right?
Yeah.
All right, so when you are doing your number line, I don't mind what your scale is, but you do need to label 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Okay, that's all I'm requiring is 1 to the left and 1 to the right. For negative 1.5, if you want to go up by 1s, you can. So if you subtract 1, negative 2.5, if you add 1.5. I like whole numbers, so I'm going to go by 0.5. So if I go up by 0.5, this would be negative 1. If I go down by 0.5, it would be negative 2. Again, your scale can be different. Okay, so you can choose what you want your scale to go by. Now, if you have a less than, we talked about this when we were doing piecewise functions. What kind of circle do you have for less than? An open circle. And if it's less than, we're going to go to the right. So when we're doing the number line, I want you to put it above. Okay, you're going to put it above so that we can easily read that. If you put it on the line, it's too difficult because you have the labels and you have the tick marks. Okay, so we're just going to write that above. Okay, and then I want you to start part B. So just do one step in part B. And it's okay if you make a mistake. Okay, so whatever jumps out to you is what you think you should do first. That's what I want you to do, and you only have to do the one step. Okay, who can tell me what they did first? Okay, so one thing you can do is multiply by negative 4. Okay, what else did some of you do first? Yeah, distribute. Good. Okay, so those were the two most common. Did anybody do anything else besides either multiply or distribute? Okay, if you distribute first, then you would get 6y minus 3 over here, and then y over negative 4 plus 2. If you multiply by negative 4 first, what you want to be careful of is you are going to have to multiply both sides by negative 4, which when you do that, when you multiply this whole side by negative 4, you have to distribute it here and here. So while the negative 4's cancel out there, you do have to distribute it to the negative 2. Okay, and then there you could multiply. Okay, I do recommend doing the distribution first. I recommend always getting rid of the parentheses first if you can. And I wouldn't even multiply by negative 4 here just because when people do it, they tend to forget to distribute. That's the only reason why I'm recommending this first. And then I would get the fraction by itself. And again, the reason why I'm recommending doing it in this order is because people tend to forget that they have to distribute. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't do it that way. Now that we're here, now I can multiply. And then see if you can finish that from there.
Eight by what? 12 by negative 8. Takes a little bit too much time. Yeah, I will. Yeah, hi.
All right, now, did we remember that when you multiply by a negative, you have to, what? I forget to do that myself because I usually remember when I divide, but not when I multiply. So if you didn't flip the sign, make sure you do that. All right, so then we get y is less than or equal, or sorry, greater than, because we're switching. Y is greater than or equal to negative 24y plus 20. Negative times a negative is going to be a positive. And then I write down flip, like for my notes, so I'm not like, oh, why did the sign change? I like to see that. That usually reminds me what I need to do here. And then I'm going to get all my y's together. So if I'm getting all the y's together, I have to add 24y to both sides. So I get 25y is greater than or equal to 20. Okay, so once you're here, we want all the y's on the same side, so I just move them over to the left. Your final answer always needs to be in reduced form. Okay, so when you're dividing by 25, okay, we're going to have y is greater than or equal to, now what number goes into both of those? 5. Okay, so we always need to reduce. Reduce, reuse, recycle. So on any type of assessment, you always need to have these in reduced form. Okay, they always have to be there for full credit. And then we're going to write this in set notation. So it's y such that y is greater than or equal to 4/5. gotta do. Okay, and again, you can pick your scale. So if you're going by ones, right, you'd have to do 1 4/5, and you'd have to subtract. I think it's easier to just go by fifths, because if you add 1/5 to 4/5, what do you get? You just get 1, right? 5/5 is 1. And if you subtract 1/5, you would get 3/5. So if you're labeling 1 to the left and 1 to the right, that's what makes sense to me. You don't have to do it like that. You could add 1 and you could subtract 1, and you'd have 1 4/5 and negative 1/5. That would be okay. And then here you are going to do a closed circle. And then if it's greater than, it's going to be going to the right. Okay, so what questions do we have on that one? So we flipped our sign okay? All right, so for example 7, we're going to solve the story problem, and we are going to write an inequality for the situation. Okay, and then we are going to solve it, and then we are going to interpret it in context. Okay, so the recommended daily intake of calcium for teens is 1,300 milligrams. Back in my day, we used to have like all these milk ads to make sure we got our calcium. Yeah. I guess osteoporosis. Osteoporosis was the problem. They decided to do ads for that. No, because it starts when you're young, you're building your strong bones. Okay, so Jake gets 237 milligrams of calcium from a multivitamin he takes each morning, 302 from a glass of skim milk. How many glasses of milk would he need to drink to meet the recommendation? Okay, so I always like to highlight the question. And then we're going to interpret the solution in context of the situation. Okay, so just like we did earlier, we are going to pick a variable to represent our unknown. So we have to find how many glasses of milk. So you can call it M, you can call it G, you can call it X. I put G for glasses of milk. Okay, so we are going to write an inequality to represent the situation. So I want you to give that a try. Try to write out the inequality. Again, if you can only do part of it, that's fine. All right, so yeah, write an inequality. So there's a few things that are going to combine for our equation. Okay, so he's taking the multivitamin, drinking the milk, the skim milk. You guys skim milk fans in here? Yeah, I love skim milk. Especially if it's pizza night, like milk with pizza, perfect. Or any Italian, spaghetti. People are crazy. Yeah, or Chinese food, if it's like too spicy, milk, Mexican food, just, takes it down a notch. Okay, so the vitamin is 237 milligrams. So you should have 237 in your equation. Okay, the 302 is per glass. So when you have that, not in your equation, in your inequality, when you have that in your inequality, whatever variable you choose is going to be multiplied by 302. Okay, and then the daily recommendation is 1,300. So is it okay if he gets more than 1,300? Okay, so then it would be greater than or equal to, because it could be 1,300 or it could be more. Okay, so now that we have this inequality, we can solve it. And I am going to let you use a calculator for this. Yeah, so you guys have probably noticed when I'm having you not use the calculator, those are a little bit easier to do with mental math. Okay, for the story problem, it's okay for you to use your calculator on that. And I even just put a little note here. Okay, so follow that same rule when you're doing your homework, okay? If you're working with crazy decimals and large numbers, you can use your calculator for that. Okay? What's that? Well, don't use that. You can't use that in here. Oh, you just mean like you'll be able to use it out in the world. Oh my God. And for this, we're just gonna let's round to the hundredth place. Okay, so we should have got 3.52. All right, fine. Okay, so G is greater than or equal to 3.52, and then the third thing we have to do is interpret in context, our favorite thing. The higher in math you get, the more writing and explaining you get to do. A treat. Okay, so when we're talking about this, we're not going to say that Jake has to drink 3.52. Okay, the way we're going to interpret it in the context is we're going to say Jake needs to drink slightly more than 3.5 glasses. Okay, or you could say a little bit more. So Jake needs to drink slightly more than 3.5 glasses, which I'm just going to write as 3.5 glasses of milk. To get the daily recommended amount of calcium. So that's what's going on here. We need to figure out how much milk he has to drink in order to get the daily recommended amount of calcium. Okay, so for today's assignment, okay, we did a couple of problems that have, listen please, we did a couple of problems that have graphs on them. The graphs only need to be on graph paper. Okay, there's not very many of those problems, so one sheet is more than enough. Okay, if you do not have your graph paper yet, I do have some that I will put out, and you are welcome to take a piece.